Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Buck Brief. Inez Feltscher is with us. She is a senior policy and legal analyst at the Independent Women's Forum. She writes, she thinks, she speaks, she does all the good commentary stuff. And Inez, always good to see you again. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? It's good to be back.
Yeah, I'm good. We've known each other like over a decade now. You realize this? We are getting old. I'm just going to start off by telling you this. Like I
Yeah,
was thinking about this beforehand.
especially
Yeah.
since we're going to talk about Sydney Sweeney,
You have to tell me what the cool kids are talking about these days. Let me jump right into this. Newsweek. This is a real headline from a real thing that Newsweek wrote. How hot girls became the right's new obsession, and then it jumps into all the like really attractive conservative people, and even people who are maybe conservative, like you mentioned Sydney Sweeney. This just never come out as Republican. Just take this and run with it for a second. Like it's a surprise to Newsweek that pretty women are something that does well in media. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, look, if they want to hand this one to us on the right, I'll take it. Right. I'm a cited expert in this article, by the way. I just want everyone to know not everyone can make it as a public intellectual. Sometimes you have to come up with at least one really great and original idea, like guys like hot chicks. And you just have to be the bravest, the brave one to say it first, like just put it out there. That's my recommendation. No, this is ridiculous, right? If they want to hand this to us, the fact that, people like looking at attractive women and men in particular like looking at attractive women and they want to label that right wing, well, I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah, this is about as basic a human's need desire as It's like people are thirsty and they like water. People like food that tastes good because they have to eat food, and like men
Well,
like
now you're
attractive.
starting to sound like a right wing extremist.
No, I know men like attractive women. Well, this is the things that they try to tag us with on the right these days, and tag us, I guess you put it in quotes, like they try to hit us with, like how do you know that there have been pieces written about how, and I wish this were more true for myself. I need to get the gym more. Right wing, how if you work out more, you become more right wing, and it seems like in the commentary space, if you're an attractive woman, you tend to be more likely to be right wing, and I think that's in part because beauty is inherently unequal. Like there's something about beauty that to people that are obsessed with collectivism and a kind of radical egalitarianism is inherently unfair.
I mean, like a lot of things, there's a sort of grain of truth underlying to this. And I think you're kind of getting at it, which is not that it's right wing for men to appreciate hot women. That's pretty universal, right?
Yes.
But what you're getting at in that inequality, there's a Harrison-Burgian kind of quality to the left where they want to label all things equally beautiful, right? And the fact that beauty exists in a hierarchy is inherently offensive to somebody who has deeply leftist sensibilities, right? Which is why we get these campaigns around obesity being beautiful, or everybody is beautiful, which that's a meaningless statement, right? If everybody is beautiful, there is no such thing as beauty. And so, like, yes, there's that underlying truth that anything that is, especially something that is inborn, right? Something that might be just granted to people on the basis that just seems extremely unfair. And so much of the leftist worldview is raging against the state of nature, raging against the inherent unfairnesses of life. Yeah, I guess that's the underlying truth under this, but it's all phrased in a very funny way in this article, like noticing the fact that Sydney Sweeney is hot makes you a right wing extremist. Or like the tweet they quoted from me was, yeah, a little bit more political in the direction that we're talking about, which is Sydney Sweeney just seems happy to be an object of desire. And yeah, that is in a certain way anti-leftist, right? It doesn't mean she's a right winger or political at all, or that hot women are political, right? But that attitude towards men ogling her essentially is something that is now forbidden by a large part of the left and considered oppressive and whatever. So that's the underlying kernel of truth to all of this. But as far as I'm concerned, they can write as many articles about as they want about the fact that if you like to look at hot
Yeah.
women, you're a right winger and you should vote for Donald Trump. I mean, great.
It was pretty funny. I mean, they single out Anna Paulina Luna, who's a friend of mine, member of Congress now. So Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, also now a mom and, been married for a number of years to a guy, great dude, SF Special Forces guy. But they cite her, and it's almost like, hey, Congresswoman Luna, she's good looking. What's up with that? You know, is this a cause for suspicion now? I mean, I'll just say this. If AOC weighed 100 pounds more than she does, she wouldn't have 8 million Twitter followers or whatever and be a household name. It's just the truth. Like, it's advantageous, particularly for women, but really in general for people. I mean, look at the ABC News guy, David Muir. I'm not even sure he could string a sentence together off camera of any merit, but I mean, that guy's handsome. I mean, let's just be honest. He's handsome.
Yeah, I think the difference in mentality, if there is a political difference in mentality, is feeling victimized by that fact, right? That fact of life versus just addressing it head on, and whether it advantages you or not, realizing that that's the state of things. But I do think there's a segment of the left that feels victimized by the mere hierarchy of beauty, the fact that some people are more beautiful than others, the fact that it is advantageous, right? I've even seen a similar kind of DEI game being played academically for like, oh, if you're overweight, for example, your lifetime earnings are smaller than somebody who isn't overweight. That probably overlaps a lot with class, first of all. But in any case, like, that they're trying to build the same victimhood structure around something that is just not equally granted across the board. And that is actually a deeply left-wing mentality, to feel the need to kick, to spend your whole life kicking against the sort of currents of nature, or the basic underlying nature, rather than just accepting that as a fact and then trying to build the best life you can around it.
We're going to talk about Kamala's campaign in the final weeks here. We've also got the VP debate coming up tomorrow, so we'll get to that in a second. But, you know, you didn't vote for this recession or inflation, but you're sure paying for it at the pump, grocery store, perhaps a stack of unpaid bills. A lot of people out there have financial stress that is just crushing, but there is a solution. DoneWithDebt.com. Unlike others, Done With Debt created new aggressive strategies designed to get you out of debt permanently without bankruptcy or loans. Done With Debt stands between you and bill collectors. They negotiate with your creditors to write off balances, cut interest, and stop penalties. Let Done With Debt help you make your money yours again. Visit donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com, or call 888-322-1054 right now. Chat with one of their debt relief strategists for free. Go to donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com. Kamala is out there and doing some podcasts now. You might have seen that. She's making some appearances, and she really, I think, manages to make herself in a worse, like, it's bad that she's done so few interviews, but every time she does an interview, it actually makes things worse. What is she supposed to do? Like, it just feels like there's really no good option.
I mean, this is the advantage of having the entire media run your campaign for you, right? I think her handling team and she herself understands that she's not good at this. I think that's why the Democratic Party kicked so hard, the leadership kicked so hard against ousting Joe Biden for as long as they did, until they absolutely could not, even lie about the condition of the president right after that debate. It's because they noticed she wasn't good at this. But what we're seeing right now is the benefits, the fact that she's in this race. I think the benefits of swapping someone out really late. She didn't have to go through a primary. She didn't have to go through any instance where, like, the Democrats, right, were at each other's throats, and therefore the media was actually doing their job, right, because they didn't know who to listen to within their Democratic paymasters to listen to. That all happened behind the scenes, and that's why we had that 3 weeks of media acting like media around Joe Biden all of a sudden. That was so puzzling to so many of us. But now that's over, and once they've unified behind her, they're basically trying to run a cover-up campaign. She's saying things that are directly contradictory to everything she's ever said and done in her life. Nobody is going to press her on that, on those contradictions, on those lies. And, yeah, she can do a few interviews. She can do one with Oprah. Like, if it's good, they'll pull out, one clip that's salvageable, and they'll kind of try to blast it around that. But really, the media is running her campaign, even more so than we've seen in Democratic, campaigns in the past, in my opinion. So I don't know if it's going to work or not. The polls are pretty close. But it's very obvious to me that if she had to do a regular campaign season, she would have had enormous difficulty with that. And the evidence is she did, right?
Yes.
Even for a Democratic Democratic audience. She never got a single vote. She had to drop out before Iowa. And I had to watch all of those debates for work. So I had to watch her repeatedly on the debate stage over and over again in 2019. She is not good at this.
She is a DEI elevated politician. And I'll just say it. I mean, you see what's people say, oh, she was the attorney general in California, and then she was a senator from California. I sit there and go, yeah, because Democrats tell us things like we need to have a black female attorney general. We need to have a black female senator. We need to have a black female vice president. And so it's not about whether Kamala Harris was particularly up for the job, astute, record of accomplishment. It was she fit the superficial characteristics of a Democrat that they were looking for at the time to promote. You know, it's amazing. You talk about diversity, right? If you bring this up and people say, oh, how dare you? No, you tell us that you want to promote diversity. And that means that you're going to put people forward who are more diverse. And that means you're going to elevate them for reasons that don't have to do with competency, ability, or track record of accomplishment. And then when we mention that, you're not allowed to say, well, you can't talk about that. Right. Which is effectively what's happening with Kamala now.
There's the double standard that you're pointing to, right? Which is they can say that they selected, like Biden said, I want a black female VP. And we're not allowed to draw the obvious conclusion that there were factors involved other than merit in selecting Kamala Harris as vice presidential candidate, right? For Joe Biden 4 years ago. And so it's obvious if you select on criteria other than merit, you're not going to get the best person for the job. And there is this, this double standard. They can say that they're doing it, but if the right notices that they're promoting people on the basis of race and sex, that they are literally saying that they are doing that, it's somehow illegitimate to talk about. And that's very clearly what's happened with Kamala Harris, by the way. Every step of the way, she's really had two things in her corner, the first and most important of which are her physical characteristics. She has always been the beneficiary of a Democratic Party who wants to promote Black women into positions of power, as many of them as possible, right? By the way, the right's not blameless in this either. I mean, the right picks candidates on DEI considerations all the time.
I know, and we don't talk about it enough on our side.
People,
Republicans
love more.
People all of a sudden, they're like, oh my gosh, you see this? Look at this great black Republican candidate. And I'm like, great candidate, maybe, sure. Like, why should we care? Are we supposed to care about the race or gender of a candidate? I thought we're not supposed to care, really. But we kind of do care on the right at the same time. Same thing with women. People are saying, oh, Trump needs to have a woman VP. Now, I understand these are just political considerations that people are making, but we're not really supposed to do that, right? Like, oh, well, we need to have a different gender on the ticket, too, because that'll appeal to more women. We play the game a little bit on the right. We're not obsessed with it the way the left is, but there's DEI on the right as well. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, I think it comes from a different motivation in a certain way. The right has this just like imbibes too much of the criticism of the left and feels the need to defend itself, right? So it's like, no, we're not what you say we are, right? We're not racist, we're not sexist. Look at all these women and minorities that we put in our convention, and look at all these women and minorities that we make as our candidates, and we overemphasize that. And in some ways it can be I actually disagree with you. I think that the sort of benefit that you get as a candidate on the Republican ticket as a minority, a racial minority, or a woman is probably even higher than it is on the left, in part because they have a larger pool to choose from, right?
Yeah, that may be true.
But there's this thirst in the Republican Party to make sure that we don't have representatives that are those boring old white men, which actually I like that this ticket to some extent, which again is not merit, but we live in this world now. So I like that our ticket this time around is Trump and Vance, because it to some extent, it's a middle finger to this entire type of thinking. Like, this is not helpful thinking. This does not help us choose the best candidates, the best leaders. These checkbox candidates are, some of them are great and some of them are terrible. Like, that's the nature of this.
We'll come into the VP. Speaking of the take of the VP debate here in just a second, but for the past decade, I've worked on and off with Stansberry Research, and they are one of the best in the world when it comes to publishing independent financial research, period. They've just produced an insightful new report about how all across America there are strange so-called accidents that are happening. We've seen reports of 911 call centers going offline, read reports of a plane falling apart mid-flight, One of the big reveals, the number of train accidents last year, some 4,700 in all. So why is this all happening? Learn why so many big accidents are taking place across America and where the next big accident is most likely to occur. It's very likely to affect you, especially if you have money in the bank or the markets. Go to americadisaster.com for the full story. You're not going to read this anywhere else. Check it out here, americadisaster.com. That's americadisaster.com. I just start with the obvious one, Inez. Anybody really care about the VP debate? I mean, really? Like, do you think it could, even if, could it move things even 1 point?
I actually think it could, and say in the same way that I thought the last debate was important, and I actually may be in disagreement with a lot of folks on the right about. I think Trump should continue to take debates because of what we talked about earlier. I think the media is running Kamala Harris's campaign for her, and they're willing to let her basically run a basement campaign and not actually ever get challenged on the fact that everything she's saying now is directly contradictory to her entire record. As anytime she's had a hand in governance, and anytime she's been on a stage describing her views for the last 20 years, she's now contradicting that. The media is never going to press that case. So it's up to Trump and Vance to press that case. Vance has been doing an amazing job of exactly that, of going on the campaign trail and highlighting over and over again these discrepancies. I hope he continues to do that tomorrow night. And I do think it could be really helpful because we have to remember, like, a lot of people only, are only tuning into politics right now. They don't remember what Kamala Harris said in 2019 on the Democratic debate stage, right? So any opportunity, even if the vice presidential debate does not get the kind of viewership that a presidential debate does, I think any opportunity to speak directly to the American people and circumvent the media is even more important in this campaign than it is for Republicans in like previous campaigns.
I also think Tim Walz has been a very apparent weak choice for Kamala Harris. And I do believe that it was her choice. Because to me, the obvious choice would have been Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I mean, I think everybody says that, right? It's not like I came up with this and, oh, look at my analysis. Like, Pennsylvania is the key. It's the only way Kamala can really win. I do have a theory that maybe Shapiro realized that Kamala's chances aren't that high, and he'd rather run on his own terms in really what will be a couple of years, right? But assuming she loses, but nonetheless, Walz to me. They came out with this whole, oh, he's a coach, he's a military guy, and you can trust him. And every time he appears anywhere, everyone goes, this guy's kind of weird. Something's off about him. He says other people are weird.
Yeah, I find him extremely off-putting. And the reason I find him off-putting is he is almost like a walking avatar of the hapless white dad in commercials. Right, we can't ever have a portrayal of a white man, God forbid, as kind of the leader of the family or as competent. And there's sort of a caricature or a character that's played in a lot of these commercials. That's like the bumbling. Or think about Family Guy or The Simpsons, right? And it's not that there are no people like that. Obviously, they're playing off a real type. But the more it becomes ubiquitous, the more it annoys me. And Tim Walz is that guy, right? He's constantly downplaying his own competence. He's constantly kind of playing the clown in a very awkward way. And I think it is built into the racial views of the Democratic Party. They're offering, with this whole white dudes for Kamala, disaster, they're offering a handout to white men, a demographic that they're bleeding, right? They're offering a handout, and their deal that they're offering is you can stop being the villain for 30 seconds if you just become a court jester. And that's what I see with Walz, aside from all of his obvious, his obvious radical beliefs, so how he governed very, very far to the left in Minnesota. But that's the point. That's the idea behind the Walz pick, is let's just tell all these white guys, like, hey, there's a place for you. You can play the kind of Robin figure to the POC Batman, right? You can be the jester, the backup, the clown, the sort of the person who's cheering in the background. That's really the role he's playing, and it rubs me the wrong way. I rarely make personal comments about must vastly prefer to talk about policy, to talk about ideology. But there is something about Tim Walz that rubs me the wrong way personally, and it's that performance.
Yeah, I think, like I said, he's a big weirdo, and I don't believe that anyone who I don't think he helps with the man problem that Kamala has, meaning male voters. I don't think he helps at all. I think people look at him and they go, the bumbling buffoon guy is not what we're looking for here to sort of make us feel like there's a balance on that ticket. But tensions in Israel continue to be really high. Over the past weekend, Israeli citizens were threatened by more than 100 incoming missiles and drone attacks. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, though, has been on the front lines for decades, helping to provide Israeli citizens with food and medicine for bomb shelters for stays that can last up to several days. For more than 40 years, the IFCJ has been on the ground in Israel. In anticipation of a show of support for our friends in Israel, hundreds, if not thousands, of churches here in America will honor them in the days immediately leading up to October 7th, the anniversary date of Israel being attacked by Hamas. Your generous donation today will not only provide a flag symbolizing your support in churchyards across America, but it will also support the fellowship's ongoing emergency efforts in Israel. Visit supportifcj.org. That's supportifcj.org. Inez, I don't know if you saw this. Not only did the Israelis kill Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, they killed his replacement within 24 hours. Like, who takes that job now?
Yeah, it has been an interesting week in terms of the things that Israel has been able to pull off. May really change the shape of the Middle East, which that doesn't happen very often in the Middle East. Sometimes I think people exaggerate the 1,000-year nature of the conflict, right? But it's true that the paradigm doesn't change very often, and oftentimes all of the options seem unpalatable. That seems to be the region for all unpalatable options. But yeah, I mean, it's hard not to cheer for what Israel has been able to accomplish in terms of competency, in terms of being able to do this targeted a number of strikes initially with the pagers and the beepers, and then the second round of walkie-talkies. They have, in a week and a half, completely dismantled, it seems like, Hezbollah's entire leadership. And Hezbollah was not just threatening Israel; it was a thorn in the side of a lot of people in the Middle East, and has prevented a lot of countries from perhaps pursuing what might more be closer to their self-interest in terms of negotiating with Israel. So the big question now is how Iran responds to this. They have to be a little nervous. The fact that this is possible, and it's not only obviously this is a direct threat to Iran as well, because they are really pulling the strings behind the scenes here. And the question is, are they going to cut Hezbollah loose, or are we going to have a wider war in the region between Iran and Israel? And that really makes me wish that we had somebody who wasn't a vegetable sitting in the presidency of the United States right now. The world generally seems extremely volatile, and in ways that I know all the comparisons are always to World War II. This seems to me to be much more of a pre-World War I kind of arrangement, where there are multiple theaters all over the world, any one of which could explode into the kind of huge conflagration that involves great power warfare. And yeah, we don't have anybody in the driver's seat, so that's extremely concerning.
That's rough. It's not a good place to be, but don't worry. If Kamala takes over, things will somehow get worse. Inez Feltscher Stedman, everybody, go check her out on social media, Independent Women's Forum. Inez, my buddy, good to see you as always. Thank you.
It's always great to see you, Buck.